The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guests today are Claire McInerney, Associate Professor in the Information Management Department at the College of St. Catherine, and Mary Birmingham, Director of Metronet, a multi-type library system in the metro area. Claire has recently written a book, Find It, the Inside Story at Your Library. We'll be talking about how children in today's society can become information literate. Claire, we're here today to talk about your brand new book, Find It, the Inside Story at Your Library. And I'm intrigued at how you, Associate Professor at the College of St. Catherine in the Information Management Department, have decided to write a book to help children understand how to use their library and its resources.
Well, Gretchen, this isn't something I set out to do. I received a call one day from one of the editors at Learner. And as you know, I formerly worked at Anoka Public Library, and the editor said that she had a good friend who was one of the administrators there who suggested that I was the person to write this book. And it was one of those calls that came out of the blue that I just wasn't expecting. And I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea because I love children. And I've worked with children in the past, even though I work with primarily adults now. And I really have an investment in wanting children to feel the power that comes from being able to find information. And I thought, well, I'll take it on and try it. And it was fun. It was fun writing it, even though it was challenging. And now that it's come out and people are buying it and talking to me about it, it's even more fun.
Well, I love it. The cover is wonderful, the illustrations are great, and most of all, it's not just a strict kind of boring how to use your library good. It involves children in the information process, and that's one of the things. You're not fixated on 3x5 catalog cards. You're not talking about the Dewey Decimal System. You really want children to understand why information is important in their lives, and I know that's something that you and Mary Birmingham from Metronet have talked a lot about. We're concerned about literacy, but as librarians and educators, we're really interested in information literacy and how children can be made part of the information society.
Right, and another idea that people are talking about too, Gretchen, is visual literacy. And before we go any farther, we should say that Harry Pulver is the illustrator of the book. And we spent a while trying to find the right kind of illustrations, starting with photographs to begin with, but then thinking that maybe this is a book that would be around for a while and photographs might date it. And after a long search, cartoonist Harry Pulver agreed to do the illustrations, and we were very pleased.
Libraries are not dull and boring places, and the illustrations very definitely
very lively.
That. Yeah. Mary, what's your comment about information literacy?
Well, my first comment is I'm not terribly fond of the term, but it is the term that the library community is using to describe something that is an increasing need in today's information-packed world, that people know how to find and use and evaluate information. In schools, it's often called resource-based learning, not just textbooks, but resource-based. And I think it's really important that we start getting some terminology that helps us to explain what we mean by coping in an information age.
So I think children and teachers using a book like this will understand that the library is more than the place to go just to find facts to write a report or just to find the answer to that one assignment. It's a lifelong learning process.
It's taken a long time, but I think librarians who work in schools have had the vision of themselves as the liaison between the teachers and the students, and really the person who provides some impetus for learning, especially when a teacher is taking on a new topic or a new unit. The library or media specialist is the person who can pull together the resources for a teacher who's very busy doing their own thing, and the person in the media center can have an overall view of what the teacher is doing, and together as a team they can really provide the learning materials for the students and in fact some of the learning activities for the students. And that seems like a new concept when we talk about resource-based learning, but I think librarians have seen themselves in that role for a long time. And this opportunity to be active and a real active partner with the teachers and the administrators and the parents is really a wonderful role. And many librarians are very happy to be this team player, and that's what's happening. And I think the book is intended to help
and
with
team
that.
playing comes across strongly in the book because you don't just talk about that school media center or the public library. You're talking about resources beyond the building, networking, interlibrary loan, concepts that a lot of students and even adults don't understand that this is available to them.
And in many ways it always has been available, but the existence of modern technology makes it so visibly available that we've become more aware of what probably was in many cases possible in the past, but the need to have that link between the school and the range of information resources, it becomes palpable when you get the technology in the picture.
Well, you talk about some libraries having cable television studios, and we're sitting in one right this morning, and the idea of television providing an opportunity for students and adults who are interested in education and social issues involving children, having access to yet another forum to share that information.
There have been so many articles written about television and how it's ruining the minds of our children and what a problem it's causing. And having an opportunity for students to actually produce television programs or to help write a computer program or work with the technology is probably the best way for them to become critical viewers and to be discriminating viewers. And libraries are really helping this happen.
Something I've seen just in the past few weeks that I think is really another dimension of this is students using census information. Now that sounds like a boring subject, but as the new census is coming out, students are becoming aware of what that process of counting is all about, and then getting them to map the information so they can see their own communities and see what the census information looks like in their own communities. And even the federal government is putting out a lot of information about kids in the census, and again using the technology to access and then to articulate the information to other audiences.
I think that's a way of it. Children are very interested in technology, and they're usually not the least bit intimidated, and they're very adept at using it. So using technology hooks them into other more basic or maybe not quite as glamorous and glitzy ways of finding information. Mary, you're on the board of Regional Cable 6, and that has a very interesting philosophy in terms of making information accessible to the metro area community.
And Channel 6 right now is at a really exciting time in its development too. We're just hiring a new executive director, opening a new office, and are really going to start to reach out a little more to involve more people in the community in the regional cable channel. The purpose of Channel 6 is to have a regional specific channel that deals with regional issues and regional organizations, and I think there's some real opportunities to get one step closer to the regional issues through that channel. Hope to work, of course, with the schools and the libraries and continuing the sort of thing that Hennepin County Library is doing right now.
One of the things, back to the students, you're working with college-age students. Do you find that they're coming into college prepared to find information in this new way, or have they a lot of stereotyped ideas about libraries and using libraries?
Well, yes and no. I see a real difference from 6 years ago when we started our information management program in the kind of familiarity that students have with new electronic information. For example, many people now are very comfortable in using a terminal to find a book. Their public library has a public access catalog, and they come into the college, and one of our fears in putting a computerized catalog up at St. Catherine's and the other colleges in the Twin Cities was that the students would have some kind of computer anxiety and they would hesitate to use it, and the students picked it up just like that. And I think part of this is because their schools had computers and the public libraries had computers, and so this is a very comfortable way for people to find information. It's fast, and with the printer right next to the terminal, the student isn't in the position of having to write down all those sources, which I remember doing when I was in high school and college, and that was a very tedious part of finding the information. So now the computer helps by printing out all the sources. So in that way, students are more sophisticated than you might suspect. In another way, some of the students who are coming to school, and we have a lot of adults who have had a gap between the time when they graduated from high school and the time that they're pursuing their degree, or people who have been away from school for a while and are pursuing their degree, and they've all used information, even if it's been just the phone book or the newspaper, but pulling that information together and using it in an original way or putting their own ideas into it is something that's still hard for a lot of people. And I believe that we need to start from the early grades and really work on that, and knowing how to use original material, for example, and how to give credit for others' ideas, and then how to come to new understandings from the ideas that you're using of other people. That's difficult. And then we have all these formats to deal with too. So just like a lot of change in our society, the banks are changing, the healthcare is changing, and we as individuals have to make a lot more decisions. The student has to make many more decisions than they used to. They have to decide whether they're going to use electronic media, an audio tape, for example, and if you use an audio tape or television program as part of the information in your term paper, how do you quote it? I mean, how do you give credit? Or if it comes over the TV, do you have to? Because that's public information, isn't it? So there are many more questions and there are many more decisions, but there's a lot more information at people's disposal too. So that's a really positive, and there are pluses and minuses.
I know, working in the public library now, we often get students who are required to use audiovisual materials in presenting their reports. So they not only need the traditional print sources, but they want slides or video clips or audio cassettes, and I think young people are learning how to integrate this in a way that is really exciting and makes for much more interesting class presentations.
Claire has just given a beautiful definition of information literacy, by the way. That's exactly what it's all about, because if you have potential access to this range of resources, you've got to know all the reasons why you would decide to take one path over another. And those paths are very, very different. Some cost money, some require getting in the car, some require waiting 2 weeks. There's a whole lot of information you need to know now that you didn't used to need to know. I used to say you found a shelf that had enough books so you could write a paper on that subject, and you completed your task. And now you need to know a whole lot about the system of how information moves and how libraries work and what sources mean before you even start.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us right down to the role of the information professional, which is what the three of us are.
Right.
Well, we are very different definitions of the information professional, which in a way shows what it means, what the information chain is all about. You need people who are teaching, and you need people who are organizing, you need people who are performing all these various functions. Someone just said to me the other day that now that we have all this electronic access to information, we know what those people in the back rooms of the libraries have been doing all these years, and now that we can get out what we want, we know how important all that work has been all along.
Because it is overwhelming when you walk into a library and you do have a database search run, for instance, and there are 15 or 20 items to know which ones would be the ones that you as a student would find most useful.
Mm-hmm. And I think librarians are finding themselves in a role where they're evaluating information more and helping the patron, whoever the patron is, whether a child or an adult, by giving them more background information on the source of the information so that the individual can decide if there's enough research that's been done or what discipline the information is coming from. And that's a role that we may not have played in the past. The other interesting thing that's happening with desktop publishing and the ability to write quickly using word processors is that people are publishing their own material and their own journals, magazines, books even. And the librarian who is trying to decide how to buy materials is almost in the position of editor now, which is a new role. And I don't think it's a role that we ever expected to be in unless we decide to go into publishing. But we're having to decide if this is worthy or not. Whereas in the past, an editor of a recognized publishing company, and we know it's Harper & Row or whatever the company is, would make many of those qualitative decisions. And now the librarian, in deciding to put those materials into a collection, which may be very high quality,
but they haven't been reviewed in the professional sources. Or
right, or there's so much coming out that I think it's harder for the professional sources to be able to review as much of the material as they used to be able to review. So that's another role in talking about the roles of the information professional that we're taking on, the role of the editor or the evaluator. And that takes more time, it takes more analysis skills. They say
is this something you're focusing on in the curriculum at St. Catherine's?
Yes, yes, is how to find out what the value of the information is. And that's difficult. They say evaluation is the highest in the order of thinking skills, and to become an evaluator of information then is a higher, more difficult role.
Well, that goes back to one of the things that the schools, I think, are concentrating on now, the development of the critical thinking skills and the development of their whole information power packet, which was a really exciting development of school librarians a year or so ago at a national level.
And related to that, too, another national initiative is a recent publication from the National Council on Social Studies about resource-based learning. Excellent publication that very clearly defines the information gathering, information evaluating skills that are necessary in the social sciences. Again, an effort to get away from textbook learning, prepackaged learning, independent learning is very key to the social studies at the national level and moving into the local level.
That's hard. It puts a much heavier responsibility, I think, on educators and librarians to make sure that they're not just following a strict curriculum where the answers are all included in a teacher's handbook of some sort. It does require a lot of extra work, a lot of more preparation time, I would imagine.
One of the important things about the book that Claire has written here is getting young people into that process, because so much of this learning is really experiential learning. You've got to handle and use and do things with the information yourself, and the younger that you start, the more you integrate that into your learning all the way along. I think it's really important to get at these middle grade, younger grade students and having them work with their parents too on all this.
And that's why the book is fun, because there is a sense of excitement. You use examples that kids are interested in. Michael Jordan, for instance, if you want to learn something about Michael Jordan. And it's the whole idea of empowering students, not only excuse me, in terms of classwork, but in terms of personal interests and understanding that you're going to need information for a variety of serious and not so serious recreational kinds of things.
Win a lot of bets if you know how to find information.
I tried to think of topics that children this age would be interested in. I did that by talking to children and found that music and sports were two big ones. Of course, we could probably guess that, but that's what the children are interested in. So I tried to incorporate those things in there, and even the questions like, when did people first eat pizza, is a question that kids might want to enjoy looking up. And yeah, Mary is right. I tried to relate the information seeking to their lives as well as to their lives in school, because children have many facets of their lives just like adults do. And they don't just live in school, and having information and the access to information is really going to help them in an exalted way to be a citizen in a democracy, but in everyday ways, helping them find the kind of bike that they want to ride, or the information about a place, or just background on their family. Genealogy is really a very popular topic for adults, as all of us who have worked in public libraries know, but children are very curious about their past too. And we have such a wonderful historical society here in the state of Minnesota that I think teachers, at least a group of teachers I worked with this summer, were interested in using that resource in their middle school classes. And once children find out about things like the state capital of Minnesota was almost in St. Peter, but just because of a fluke of the ending of a legislative session, it remained in St. Paul. Kids get a new view of their state and their community, and that's very exciting. It makes their learning touch their everyday lives and their families' lives. So.
Well, it makes history real, and it makes information something that's just not static.
I think sometimes parents will read to children as long as the children can't read by themselves. But when the children learn to read by themselves, which is a very important skill, they can lose that connection and forget that learning together, gathering information together, can be just an extension of that partnership, and the parent is learning at the same time as the child is learning.
Well, parents can help refresh their library skills and information-seeking skills.
Well, everybody needs not just to refresh, but to gain new information library skills, because the game has changed, and everybody's a learner in how to use information now.
Lifelong learning. I really appreciate the fact that you talk about compact discs. You talk about the potential of students or just people in the community calling the public library or calling the university to get information, calling up through their own home computer. I think there's
the
enormous
emphasis is
potential.
on the active seeking of information in the process. And all three of us are parents. And one thing that's occurred to me as the differences in searching for information among, say, our generation and our children's generation is that the children are learning in a very active way about our world. One difference that we've seen at the college is more and more students traveling abroad. And
everyone, according to my children, everyone except them.
Yeah, everyone seems to be looking at the world in a real active way. The young people are learning about the world or about their country by traveling to different places. And it used to be that you would have a senior trip to someplace in your state. And now the kids are traveling across the country with their debate teams, and the band goes to Florida for a parade, and they're learning about their country in the early grades, and they're learning about international life by doing it. And in a way, the children lead us, and they show us how it needs to be done, but still, they don't have the experience that people who are older have, and we can really help them by finding the information that's been written down, that's been recorded. Another surprise that I've heard from kids came from a conference we had on growing up in the late 20th century a few years ago. And the children said if they could find anything in their libraries that they couldn't find now, they'd like to have tapes of recent American events, speeches by Martin Luther King.
Well, so often classes end at the end of World War II or something because there just isn't time. And current events are sort of left to the nightly news. I think this has sort of been illustrated with the recent thaw in the Cold War and the things that have happened recently in Eastern Europe. I heard a university professor talking about how her class was totally irrelevant at this point because the textbooks were 2 to 3 years old in terms of information by the time they were published. So she was helping the students to understand the past by concentrating on newspaper, magazine reports that were current and making these students understand that history is a continuous process. It doesn't just end, and you can't just memorize the dates.
Well, and not even everything you read or everything you see is as it seems to be. I think that's one of the things in dealing with the global environment is that we need to ourselves understand how the media are used or how information does flow in order to interpret for ourselves what's going on in the
Well,
world.
that gets back to Claire's point of visual literacy and helping students to be critical viewers. And the more they know about production and how easy it is to change and edit and put additions on, the more critical they will be in viewing and reading and listening.
And they need to know too what the symbols mean, what's behind. If you throw out so-and-so, what does that mean? You need to know history and how to learn about history in order to understand the present. It isn't just what you see in front of your face at the moment.
And it goes along with the whole exciting publishing trend for children and young people. Much more emphasis on well-illustrated well-researched nonfiction that makes a variety of topics very, very interesting to look at just for personal reasons rather than just to fulfill a school assignment.
Some of the most exquisite art, I think, original art that's being published today is being published in children's books. It's really beautiful.
So by using your book, Find It, The Inside Story at Your Public Library, we can help the children in our lives become much more information specialists, more aware of what's available through the variety of community resources, public libraries, school media centers, regional cable television, newspapers.
That's right.
It's an exciting opportunity. Do you have plans for more books?
Yes, Gretchen, this is the first of a series, and the second one will be called Tracking the Facts. It's for the same age group, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, intended to help children get ideas and put together a report. So it's more of the research and the processes in the research, and I cover some things like webbing your ideas and mapping out the report, and I use several different examples from real life and from a possible school report, and that
Using a
has
variety
finished.
of sources besides the encyclopedia.
That's the, yes. So often that's where it stops. But this book shows how children can use many other sources, both book and video and electronic and so forth.
That's exciting too, because it gets on to the next point, which is being able to express yourself. Taking the information, what Claire described earlier, and using it effectively, because if you can't use it, you didn't do you much good. And just writing a dead report and having it stop there doesn't move the idea along at all. So that's exciting to be thinking about the next phase.
That sort of thing probably will make children much better writers too. Going through this sort of a process.
That's the point, yeah. I think we've done a really good job of encouraging children to be creative writers, and from someone who has taught children in middle school grades, I know that very often the expectations weren't very high, that to get them to go to the library and find an encyclopedia seemed like a great achievement at one point. But often children reach to the expectations you have of them, and they are capable of doing a lot more than that, and this is to encourage them and to give them some tools to use. Both books have activities at the end of each chapter, even though they're intended for children, which is a little risky because children aren't usually the ones who buy these books. Librarians and teachers are. But the activities at the end of each chapter really are intended for the teacher to use in the class, or the librarian, if the librarian is lucky enough to have the time and opportunity to work with children in leading them through a research report.
As with so much work with children, it takes an interested and caring adult to help them
That's right.
out. Thank you very much for being with us today on All About Kids, and we'll look forward to having you back again when your next book is published.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thanks for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency.